All right, we're fixing to watch something here that I thought was kind of interesting, especially due to the fact that the individual that's talking to you right now has been bullied, harassed, put in mental institutions, demoralized, dehumanized, lied about, lied to, poisoned, and basically society in general has turned their backs on the founder of the Windmill Ministries simply because of various corrupt law enforcement agencies, regardless whether it was Secret Service, regardless whether it was the FBI, regardless whether it was the U.S. Marshals or other known federal, state, or local agencies. They have basically dug their own holes to the degree that now we're all feeling the circumstances on account of. And the thing about it is, when it comes to feeling, as far as looking at all the damage, looking at all the violence, looking at all the irregularities going on with our politics, as far as us being trillions of dollars in debt and all the people in jail and all the suicides and all the homicides, all the gun violence, all the overdoses, it's only going to get worse. Just like the imbalances pertaining to the weather, going from one extreme to another, it's only going to get worse. Who do we have to blame for the situation that we're now all basically unbearably going through? It's the people that come before us. It's the politicians that come before us that help to dig the very hole that we're in right now. And even with this country being topsy-turvy the way that it is, we're still not hammering the nail in accountability issues where we should be whenever it comes to the very people that helped to put us where we are today. So whenever it comes to this country that at one time used to stand for the good versus the bad, we have various law enforcement agencies all across the board, from judges to agents to just regular police officers or sheriffs that was willing to let this get this far out of hand. And whenever it comes to feeling, it's not just going to be what you actually feel emotionally towards looking on the TV and seeing all the violence and seeing all of this and seeing all that. But there's actually going to come a time whenever you are actually going to feel the forces of nature in the degree of being very, very uncomfortable. Now, there's a lot of people that's very, very rich here in America that can afford to stay in an enclosed area, basically in a secluded, environmental controlled area, to the point that they don't have to worry about the elements outside so badly. But whenever it gets so bad that in and of itself is going to start reeking into people's homes because of massive electricity shortages, power outages, or just the fact that it's so unbearable outside that it is affecting you inside your house, regardless whether you're wealthy, rich, or whatever, then is whenever you'll hear a lot of people belly aching about what we're all going through right now. Please listen to this as they're making it known pertaining to what's went on up in Washington, D.C. just within the past day or two, pertaining to the people that's reaching out towards trying to explain, exploit the bad people into the eyes of the general public. You know, I noticed back whenever I was a child growing up in this area, probably in the late 70s, early 80s, it was considered taboo if you was a tattleteller. It was considered taboo that if you decided to turn somebody in towards doing wrong, it was considered taboo to the point that you was a snitch or a narc, and in doing so, the people, the bad people pertaining to the lawbreakers, they looked down on you, and some of them even tried to hurt you. Regardless whether they was hurting you emotionally, hurting you physically, they was trying to hurt you. Well, today, whenever you got more lawbreakers than you got good people, you basically turn the country into an environment similar towards a jail or a prison system, to where you see no evil, do no evil. In other words, as long as it don't affect you, you didn't see nothing, you didn't hear nothing, you don't know nothing. That was the same type of imagery that the North took on back probably in the late 70s, early 80s, that now has spread abroad across the nation, to where now people even in the South don't know their own neighbors, much less care about their neighbors, much less want to get involved in any of their neighbors' affairs. In a good way, not a bad way, but in a good way. This standoffish type atmosphere has been created by the Luciferian Lucifer, that basically has encaptivated our great nation into a nation now of uncertainty and untrust. And whenever you have a nation that is full of uncertainty and untrust, then it becomes very, very lethal. Just as the Bible talks about that in the last days we will be living in perilous times. Who created these perilous times? What created these perilous times? How come we're in these perilous times? Because I can remember a time right here in Northwest Tennessee whenever we didn't have to even worry about locking our doors at night. Until long about the early 70s, somebody decided to come into our home and steal about 4 or 5 nice looking shotguns that we usually kept hanging on the wall. We didn't even lock our doors. Most people back then didn't even pull their keys out of their automobile, because we knew that wasn't nobody going to bother it. Well, we have changed from being a trustworthy nation to now an untrustworthy nation, especially with all the violence, especially with all the drug overdoses and all the drug use that's going on. And it's turned into a very, very crappy country to live in. Don't get me wrong, I love my country. I love everything that America originally stood for, whenever it was fighting for the freedoms of their citizens, and whenever it was fighting for their own personal independence. I love that about America, and I believe that probably over half the people that live in America love the same thing. But whenever you have a nation that has basically been turned totally upside down to the point that now it's being run like a prison center, and even in a prison center, if 2 people get into it in a pod, and I've seen this with my own eyes, where somebody gets the very heck beat out of them to the point that they actually need to go to the hospital because of, and the guard comes in and starts asking everybody, what happened, what happened? And the individual that's laying there with blood all over him, oh, I fell. Whenever it gets to the point that we are so frightened in telling the truth that we're not going to tell the truth, regardless what the truth may be, then we are living no longer in a free, fair, open society that originally was designed to help to re-clear itself or to straighten itself out by average people speaking truth to power. In other words, whenever it gets to the point that the average person that knows the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and they say the truth, and they speak up against that in which what's going on, to the point that now they get knocked down, now that they get put away, now that they get brutalized on account of them telling the truth, and society allows for that to happen, then we're no longer dealing. I'm going to say it one more time. Then we're no longer dealing in a free, fair, open society. Please listen.
If you're one of these folks willing to come forward and talk about what's going on out there, you get attacked.
As the DOJ and FBI have become more political, they have amassed more power. And as they have amassed more power, they have become more political.
If you do not comply with the political agenda of the FBI, they will crush you.
Republicans are saying the FBI is broken. After hearing from FBI whistleblowers in a hearing yesterday, they described episodes of abuse and retaliation and claimed politics have weaponized America's top law enforcement agency. Fox News contributor and Wall Street Journal columnist Kim Strassel, great to have you here. Your column is on this very topic today and on the Durham Report. Let's listen to the whistleblowers. They were on Jesse Watters' Primetime last night.
We know that parents attending school board meetings have been targeted. We know that pro-lifers praying at clinics have been targeted. We know that Catholics simply going to church, going to mass have been targeted. We sort of laid the groundwork for people to feel that they can be protected as whistleblowers with the protection that we didn't receive, but now that the Republicans in the House are on alert for that.
We're just trying to do the right thing for this nation, and if that means even becoming homeless at the hands of the FBI, then we're willing to do that.
Kim, from Monday afternoon when the Durham Report came out to yesterday, or even today, how do you assess the week for the FBI and for these whistleblowers going forward?
Yeah, it's been a really tough week for the FBI, obviously. And in terms of these particular individuals, the facts of their cases obviously are going to have to be looked at more closely because, you know, they're making claims, the FBI is making counterclaims. But what really jumped out at me, Dana and Bill, is some of the information that came out in the hearing talking about FBI policy. You know, for one thing, I was very struck by the suggestion that the FBI is using certain performance metrics in which agents are rewarded if they use more wiretaps on individuals. That seems to me a kind of problematic incentive system. You know, this issue of a claim that there's now a policy that they are trying to elevate what would normally be called other crimes into domestic terrorism crimes, to put them in a different bucket. That might sound very political to some people, the idea that they are targeting Catholics. So I think, again, these questions of whistleblowing and retaliation are very serious and they need to be investigated. But so too does a lot of the information these guys brought about supposed changes in the way the FBI is operating.
On that point, Kim, you got to wonder where that goes. You know, I mean, the only thing that really brings change is whether or not there's enough public pressure. And if the public doesn't know about it because the media doesn't cover it, it's a whole different matter. This is what we found last night at 3 major networks, right? Their primetime coverage, 6:30 in the evening, East Coast time, 0 minutes on ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then we found this headline on CNN last night, quote, Jim Jordan's FBI whistleblowers testify publicly before Congress as questions about their legitimacy remain. I'm up against that. 50% of the country is going to take that side.
And you know what started this? In 1988, whenever the Reagan administration done what they done towards saying one thing but doing the complete different opposite during the Bush administration, talking about love and peace, but then turning around and going to war with various countries. And I'm not saying that Saddam Hussein was a good man, because his ethics, his tactics over there was very, very brutal. But now, since we can see where we have eliminated that type of strong arm force, it basically created a vacuum. And even Donald Trump has said this, it created a vacuum to where now a great deal more of instability has hit into those areas towards bringing more terrorists and more people, brutal, cruel, mean people into that area. I don't agree with the tactics that Saddam Hussein was using on his people. But then again, I also look at it from another perspective, is that some people you can't use decent tactics on. That's just like over here in America. Whenever you got somebody that's out of their mind and they have taken some sort of drugs that's messed up their mind, or they need to be put on drugs because of their mind, either or, they're not in touch with reality, the same sense that we're in touch with reality of, and they get out here and they're a harm to society, they're a harm to themselves and to others, then at that point in time, law enforcement has to look at that problem and say, you know what, we're going to have to do whatever we must do to eradicate the problem. And if it means putting that individual down, kind of like putting down a vicious bear or a vicious lion that's out here killing a bunch of people in the villages, then that's what we must do. We must kill this animal that's doing this, if we're going to survive as a nation, if we're going to survive as a people. Whenever you start double stepping, and that's exactly what the media during the time of the Reagans and the Bushes done, in saying one thing, white man speaketh with forked tongue, but by doing something completely different, then you run into more problems like you could not even begin to fathom. And that's basically where we are right now, of the illegitimacies coming from the newsrooms, coming from the reporters that was willing to report half-truths, or they was biased in what that they was reporting. They wasn't reporting the whole truth because they had sidestepped it in telling their version of what that they wanted their viewing audience to hear. And that's not the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God, to begin with. You're supposed to tell the news as the news needs to be told, regardless whether you like it or not, regardless whether it's shameful or not, regardless whether it's enduring or it's bad or it's enlightening. You're supposed to tell it like it's supposed to be told. And whenever you no longer do that, then you're becoming biased. Then you're becoming illegitimate. And I have seen so many illegitimacies in the past 30 plus years that has put us where we are today because of this type of abusive, brutal behavior.
You know, if you think about how far we have come in the media, I mean, what does the media exist for? It's supposed to be there to question government power. You know, and among the agencies that have the most power in government are those of law enforcement.
Stop. That's not the sole purpose of the media. The media is to be upfront towards telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God. The media is there to enlighten the people, regardless whether it's of this sort or that sort, regardless whether it's something big, regardless whether it's something little, regardless whether it's something that has been hindering the politicians in that area or something that's enhancing the politicians in that area. The media is supposed to be truthful to that society that it's basically being a tool for, an entity for. And whenever the media is no longer doing their jobs, then the rest of it falls apart in behind the media. And that's exactly what has happened for the past 30 plus years that has allowed this thing to get in this type of shape. Like I said, we started out in my life of a society that could trust one another and a person's word was their bond. We started out in society, or it was around in this area, back in the late 60s and early 70s, to where people trusted people to the point that most of them didn't pull the keys out of their automobiles and did not lock their doors. We have gone from a society in the country, rural areas, that somebody either in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, maybe the 10th or 11th grade, could pull up at a school in a pickup truck with either a shotgun, a rifle, or a bow and arrow in the back of their glass to where everybody and their brother, Tom, Dick, and Harry could see it. They'd lock their doors, go to school, knowing that at 2:30, 15 minutes till 3, whenever the bell rung, you was fixing to get in your automobile and go down to the woods, and you was fixing to hunt you some daggum squirrel or some rabbit or whatever was going on during the time that you was doing whatever that you was doing. And nobody questioned that. Nobody questioned that. Because we was living in a society that you could put trust in one another's word. Today, if you was to pull up at a school displaying guns in the back end of your glass of your pickup truck or your vehicle, you would be immediately approached with authority figures towards wanting to know what was your intent. Period. And it's just about got that way now in society and everything. Everything. And eventually, whenever it wiggles down, whenever it wiggles and weaves itself down to the point that our military bases become the same thing. And those that's in military on compound post can't trust each other, then you got total anarchy. And it's almost become that bad because a few years ago, it was over in Texas where some Muslim, he was supposed to have been a psychiatrist or something like that, basically went off the deep end and killed a bunch of people on a military post. Whenever it gets to the point that we can no longer trust each other, my friends, an enemy has come in and done this. It has come in and it has manipulated trust into distrust. And whenever you have that as a society, regardless whether it's an American society, a Russian society, a Chinese society, an Indian society, whenever you have a society that becomes that way, you have a very, very unusual, abnormal, dangerous, erratical society. And that is of the works of the devil. That's exactly what the devil is out to do. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And if he can make us turn against one another to the point that we kill one another, then he's done his job by deceiving not just the American people, but society in general on the planet. He's done his job. Because that's what he set out to do. Deceive, manipulate the people.
And yet we have a media that is now lockstep defending the FBI, as it has essentially been doing ever since Trump took office, and we first got this Russia collusion hoax that came out, and apparently it's not done doing it. Look, these guys brought some very legitimate concerns. I thought it was really unfortunate that Democrats immediately tried to attack their legitimacy instead of listening to them and hearing them out. And one other thing that came out of this too, though, is that we need to look at the guys at the top of the FBI, all right? There's a tendency to say the entire FBI is rotten. What we do have, in fact, are a lot of agents, hardworking men and women that are trying to do the right thing. And what we're hearing again and again, and it's what we got out of the Durham report, is that it is Washington, D.C., executive headquarters,
Can I
the
read to you,
7th
Kim?
floor of the FBI.
Could I just read to you the FBI statement on Durham?
I want to weigh in again on this. Whenever you have officials working for the government towards drawing a government check that's supposed to be assigned public defenders for the public, and that public defender knows good and well what the authorities in that particular situation or in that particular area is doing that is not above the board, and they still wink at this and allow for this to go on, then once more you're dealing with a illegitimate system, because these people that work for the government to be able to work for the defense of the innocent, whenever it gets to the point that they're just as manipulative of those as trying to put away people for whatever reason, and I'm going to use my situation up in Wheeling, West Virginia, pertaining to Jolene Nugent, and she may be a very good, sound-hearted woman. I've never really analyzed her work. I don't know what school she went to. I don't know her grades. I don't know who her parents was. I don't know her ethnic background towards her religion or none of the above. But whenever she stood there knowing that the federal United States government under Mr. Walter Bush, Senior Bush, was lying pertaining to their attempts toward trying to put me away, and she did not raise a red flag to that, made her just as guilty as the perpetrators that was on trial that was lying towards saying that I had said during a 911 telephone call that I was on my way to take out George Walter Bush's life, as in being an assassin. And their excuse was, well, how come this isn't on your recording device? And their excuse was, well, it must have been a malfunction of the equipment. But yet now my recorder recorded everything per detail, the same as their recorder, and there was no differences in the recordings. None. Verbatim, per word. And they still done this? That's called being blackballed. Same thing went on in my life right up here in Kentucky. Whenever Land Between the Lakes, somebody up there got pissed off because they didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish the first time in 2010 towards taking me before a federal magistrate in Paducah, Kentucky, and them sending me to downtown Chicago to a Dr. Dana in MCC, federal institution associated with mental health. Whenever the findings come back that I had scored a AAA in all marks, it obviously put a crawl in somebody's throat. And because I made 2 telephone calls after all my probation period had ended, I was no longer under any type of restraints, and both telephone calls was in a non-threatening form, and it was in the span of a 90-day period, and them still pull off what they pulled off up in a federal park, LBL, Land Between the Lakes, towards gathering me up all the way out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, because I had just recently fought another case out there, and because I had a good attorney, and because we wasn't willing to buck to the system, they basically had to throw the charges out because they know they didn't have nothing to begin with. But whenever you take, once more, a public defender that was willing to wink, that was willing to go along, that was willing to sidestep that in which what the officials was doing, even though she told me verbatim that they do not have a case, that if anything what they're trying to do is double jeopardy, that they should release you and let you go. Whenever you have public defenders being hired by the tax-paying people that aren't willing to do the right thing, then you no longer have a decent system, but now you have a messed up system. Whenever I come back to Tennessee in 2014, and my brother wound up dying because of all the BS that was going on out here towards us being attacked, hunted, demonized, dehumanized, the way that we was here in Northwest Tennessee, even though we had deep, deep roots here. And I stood in front of Johnson, that is now taking the place of another, I guess you'd call him a figurehead of the particular system that basically was trying to score a big score because he'd foreseen me as me being a big catch whenever I come back to Northwest Tennessee because of all the radical gossip that had been talked about on various internet lines. Whenever you have a person like that is that illegitimate, and a judge, and the whole system that become that corrupt to the point that they knowed what they was doing to me was unlawful, then you no longer have a decent system, but you have a messed up system. Just like whenever the people that almost overdosed in the same county, in the same jail that I was in, under the watch of Mike Wilson, whenever you have a group of people that's willing to let somebody die during their watch, and they're not willing to take on accountability issues pertaining to the individual that overdosed and died during their watch, then once more, you no longer have a decent system. You have a tyranny type system. You go from a decent, honest system to a tyranny type system, a messed up system. And regardless whether it was bias related, motivated, regardless whether it was motivated because of color, regardless whether it was motivated because of religion, in my particular case was motivated around my religion, of what I believe, because it was very obvious that I've been putting out what I've been putting out for the past 30 plus years, since 1989, publicly here in this area. It ain't like it was a secret. It ain't like I just started it the day before yesterday, whenever I come back to Tennessee in 2014. Whenever you have a messed up people, then you're no longer dealing above the board, but now you're dealing below the board. And it doesn't matter if it starts from the bottom and goes to the top, or it starts at the top and goes to the bottom. But if we're not willing to put in the check balances towards people being able to speak truth to power to help keep things in line, then you have a total calamity of a broken system. And that validates the reason why that my brother and I, before we even hung, I guess, the second base of timber into this project out here, we put up a cross indicating that the system, a broken cross leaning it to the side, indicating that the system that we was under was no longer a countable system, but it was a broken system. It was a fraudulent system. It was a corrupt system. And now the effects is falling far and wide, to the point that now, regardless whether it's the FBI, the ATF that messed up what they messed up with pertaining to the Branch Davidians, regardless whether it's Homeland Security, Secret Service, or upper levels of management pertaining to the Department of Defense, whenever you have a system that is this broken and people aren't willing to get the bad apples, the bad actors out of the system, then the whole thing becomes corrupt. It's kind of like that one bad apple that spoils a whole bunch. If you don't hurry up and get that one bad apple out of that bushel basket, you're going to have two bad apples. Then the next thing you know, you're going to have from 2 bad apples to 3 bad apples, from 3 bad apples to 6 bad apples, to 6 bad apples to 12 bad apples. And the next thing you know, the one bad apple that started out bad spoiled the whole bushel basket. It's just like the Bible talks about the vineyard, a grape vineyard, that it's not the big fox that you got to worry about so much, but the little bitty fox. Because the little bitty fox can go in between the vines, and the little bitty fox can chew on a vine over here and chew on a vine over there. He does a little damage over here, he does a little damage over there, and he's unrecognizable because he's so small. But the whole time during he's in that vineyard, he's working on them vines. He's tearing that vineyard up. And the next thing you know, once the keeper of the vineyard realizes there's something wrong with my vineyard, then it's too late, because now the whole vineyard has died because of the small fox. It was the little things that kept compiling again and again and again that caused the whole shooting batch to go bad.
It said that the conduct in 2016 and 17 that Special Counsel Durham examined was the reason that current FBI leadership already implemented dozens of corrective actions, which have now been in place for some time. Had those reforms been in place in 2016, the missteps identified in the report could have been prevented. Is that going to answer the mail on that?
No, absolutely not. And you know, Durham himself seemed to predict this response. And he actually said in his report, look, I'm not recommending any wholesale changes here because the rules are already in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. The problem was, in fact, some people at the top that forgot their oath that they made to the FBI, and that's what's got to change. You know, and he was really directing that.
They didn't forget their oath. They didn't forget their oath. They was persuaded elsewhere. How was they persuaded? Who knows? May have been money. May have been they was intrigued. Maybe they was trying to prove a point. Maybe they was biased against the person that they was trying to put away. Maybe they just woke up one morning and decided, you know what, I'm not going to do the right thing. They didn't forget their oath. They didn't forget their oath. They know what their oath is. To uphold the law. Uphold the Constitution. Foreign and domestic. And whenever the Windmill Ministries Missions was doing what it was doing in 1989, and it was told by the upper levels of whatever you want to call it here in this area, told that he was to get off the radio station or seek employment elsewhere, and the individual that was running the business went along with that, that meant that he was just as corrupt as his uncle or whoever he was, Mr. Old Man Wooten, that had Wooten Chevrolet Garage up here in Dresden. That meant that his nephew was just as wicked and deep. Now the nephew probably thought to himself, well, if I don't do what my daddy's brother tells me to do, I'm going to suffer great consequences on account of it. And the next thing you know, he'll pull the keys out from underneath me, and I won't no longer be able to operate. In other words, he felt like that he was probably under the gun in some form or fashion. But still, again, that does not ignore the fact that my boss man at the time, which was Jimmy Atkins, still went ahead and went along with his uncle's approval. Along with all these other churches around here that demonized me and dehumanized me because I had the apocalypse model in the back end of my truck representing the opening of the seals pertaining to the four horsemen. People thought that if we can execute denial, if we will not support this individual that has these ideals, that believes in what he believes in, if we can stop this at the bud, the rest of it will not be fulfilled pertaining to Revelations. Well, you know, if that was something that I had taken upon myself, that I basically self-induced myself with, that theory may have very well worked. But because it was not something that I manufactured myself, and because I was called of God of doing what I was doing, now the whole thing has backfired on the people in Northwest Tennessee. All them people, all them preachers, all them churches, all them politicians that didn't want to support the founder of the Windmill Ministries Missions, now can look back and say, wow, we wish that we would have supported him, because his ministry was a ministry of peace and love and grace and contentment and prosperity. His ministry that God had given to him was not some sort of a occultist type ministry. It was everything being taught out of the King James Version Bible, beginning in Kenton, Tennessee in 1983. These people have dug in their own holes. But what's even worse than the fact that they have dug in their own holes towards making not only their lives now miserable, but their children and their children's children's lives miserable, is that none of them are willing to admit to it. Which once more adds that much more pain and misery to the insult of it in and of itself. Now, people like the head minister, Brother Brown, that was in charge of the United Pentecostal people down in Jackson, Tennessee, of the Lighthouse Church down there, that wound up being the supervisor over the whole churches in Tennessee, he throwed up his hands there towards the last and said, well, Dennis, I'm not telling you not what to do. In other words, now he's backing up and saying, well, you got the right to preach and believe in whatever you want to preach and believe in, Dennis. But yet, no, I ain't seen Brother Brown come around towards saying, Dennis, I was wrong about you. I should have supported you during the time that you was issuing out your message. And you know what? The odds of me seeing Brother Brown come to 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, and come to me in that type of tone of voice, in that type of demeanor, is probably slim to none. Just like Brother Hagel over there in Union City. Brother Hagel, he's a good man. He's never, not one time, said anything about me in a wrong type way that I know of. He's always welcomed me into his audience. He knowed that something had went on back about a year or so ago pertaining to another member of his that wanted to approach me in a financial way that I felt like was inappropriate. And I quit going. I quit going to Brother Hagel's church, United Pentecostal Church, across from the Church of Christ Church where my cousin goes to church at, over by the hospital. I quit going. Now, has Brother Hagel done anything beyond that point wrong to Dennis? No. No, he has not. But on the other hand, has Brother Kegel, has he come to me at 291 Thompson Road, because I've been to his church, I've been to his establishment dozens of times since I come back to Northwest Tennessee. Has he or any of his members come out here one time towards wanting to bury the hatchet and clear the record? The answer to that is no, that I'm aware of. They may have come out here and I wasn't here, but they didn't leave a note. And I usually pretty well let my telephone number pretty well out there towards any and everybody can contact me. Besides that, you can always send off a letter in the post office box. As far as I know, my post office service, the postmaster, still runs out here every day other than Sunday. That's either picking up mail or delivering mail, and it don't take all that much to lick a stamp, even though the stamps has went up like they have. But it don't take that much to send a letter and saying we would like to formally have an opportunity to set up an appointment with you and talk to you. We could either meet at their place, my place, or we could meet in a public place like McDonald's. Or maybe a public library somewhere. And sit down and discuss and hash over a few things. Have I had anybody mail me those type of letters and make those kind of comments or suggestions? No. N-O. No. So yes, Brother Kegel over in Union City, Tennessee is a good man. And he supports his ministry that he felt like that God had called him into 110%. But on the other hand, he hasn't went a step further like the Bible talks about. And the Bible says that if thy brother asks you to go a mile, you're not only to go a mile with that brother, but you're to offer to go 2 miles with that brother. If thy brother asks for your coat, not only are you to offer your coat, but you're to also offer your cloak also with your coat. In other words, you're supposed to go beyond the call of duty in making sure that whoever is in need, that you take care of those needs. Have I seen any of the brothers or the sisters in the Lord in Northwest Tennessee that has done this to the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions? The answer to that is N-O. No. And it's not like that I've been working in secret. It's not like that I've been working in some sort of commune somewhere. It's not like that I've been asking people to drink poison. It's not like that I've been disabled to the point that you haven't seen me in various places, regardless whether it was Lowe's, Walmart's, restaurants, or whatever. I'm pretty well open. Have I gotten any type of confirmation from any of the courts, regardless whether it was Trigg County courts, Land Between the Lakes, Federal Park, the courts in Paducah, Paducah courts, Livingston County authorities? Have I gotten any type of formal apology from any of those people? No. Have I gotten any type of formal apology from Homeland Security pertaining to Secret Service that intervened into a ministry in 1989 in Madison County? No. Have I gotten any type of formal confirmation pertaining to what Johnson had done in basically blackmailing me into me pleading guilty to a case that I never should have pleaded guilty to? Knowing good and well that I had been railroaded, knowing good and well that I was in a very, very vulnerable state pertaining to my brother dying, knowing good and well that the attorney that I'd hired messed up my whole case. No. Have I seen the judicial system that basically put Dennis James Jackson on a hit list towards him being an enemy to the state of Tennessee? Number one enemy. If you have a governor that bans you from all federal facilities that he's working under, and then he realizes that he shouldn't have done that, that you did have the right intent by going out to Oklahoma and going out to Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, towards investigating that situation, have I gotten any type of formal confirmation from the state of Tennessee pertaining to what their governor done to the founder of the Windmill Ministries? The answer is no. N-O. Now, what we're talking about here is a pattern. And it's a pattern of not only what that they have done, but it's a pattern in what that they haven't done that they should have done. Have I gotten any type of formal confirmation from the Oklahoma authorities by going out to Oklahoma, rolling up my sleeves and realizing that there was more to the Oklahoma bombing other than a Ryder truck and a bunch of fertilizer? After they blowed the back of my truck up that they shouldn't have, taken upon themselves by using me as a punching bag, have I gotten any type of formal confirmation from any of the Oklahoma authorities? No. The answer is no. A matter of fact, on the 25th anniversary, I requested to go back to Oklahoma, to the Mario building, and just be a participant, towards just being a spectator. Good enough to call them, basically giving them a heads up towards what my feelings was. a courtesy call, and rather them extending that courtesy back to me by calling me up or writing me a letter, they call up the sheriff's department in Weakley County and send out a deputy out here and tell me that if I even so much as show up around that Merrill building, that I will be going to jail. Once more, let's keep Mr. Jackson's hands tied. Let's keep a piece of tape over his mouth. We don't want to hear nothing that he's got to say, because as far as we're concerned, he's somebody that's out of touch with reality. But yet and all, now people's eyes are beginning to awaken that what I went out there for in 2009 is and has, in fact, come true. Have I got any type of confirmation from the authorities over in Humphreys County, Waverly, Tennessee, regarding me walking into an individual's business, asking a few questions, making a few statements, walking out, didn't purchase not one thing? And maybe that's where I messed up at. Maybe I should have bought something in that store. I don't know. But I just know this, that whenever you wind up with the probation officer and her supervisor and a deputy out here at your house threatening you and telling you that if you don't go to a psychiatric ward immediately and get some sort of an approval by the doctors, we're going to consider that a violation of your probation, and we're coming back out here, we're going to arrest you, and we're going to drag you back in front of that very same corrupt judge that was in behind towards putting an illegitimate felony on your life to begin with, and in front of that prosecuting attorney to begin with. We're going to drag you back in there, and instead of you spending just a few days in jail, Mr. Jackson, you'll probably be spending a great deal of more time, because once more, it was the state of Tennessee that wanted to put me down as me being a habitual offender, even though the charges had been amended up in Kentucky, and the only reason why that I pleaded guilty to those charges is so that I could go ahead and get out after being in there for almost a year over 2 non-threatening telephone calls. Now, if this system that we're talking about here, if it's not messed up, I will kiss your butt. I will kiss your tail in front of a group of people, and I will give you a full 30 minutes to draw up a crowd. And I will do so proudly. If this that I'm talking about, that I have not been bamboozled, railroaded, or thrown under the bus towards. Now you wonder how come the whole thing went a flop? You wonder how come from A to Z that it's gone basically berserk? It's because of those little bites, of those little foxes. Little fox over here, little fox over there, little fox over here. Once more, you take the little fox that you can weave in and out of the vines real easily. If you let him bite long enough and stay in the vineyard long enough, I guarantee you he will contaminate, deform, or even ruin the whole vineyard. The whole thing. Kind of like the one bad apple spoiling the 2. The 2 spoiling the 3. The 3 spoiling the 6. The 6 spoiling the 12. Works on the very same level. And if you're not willing to cut it off at the chase, then you have a runaway train. And that's what these people on the news is trying to tell you that is going on. And that's going on just within their little circle up there on a big level. So can you only imagine how many other little circles, such as myself, of people that's being railroaded, people that's being harmed, people that's being hoodooed, people that's being basically treated as an outcast. And that's exactly what the founder of the Windmill Ministries has been treated as for the past 30 plus years, since I did put those horses in the back end of my truck, since 1989. Actually, my story goes before 1989 of a telephone call that I made to the White House in 1983. ever since that call to the White House about the Antichrist come about in my life, I have seen my life go from an average old Joe to somebody that was either a lunatic or somebody that the law has tried to criminalize again and again and again just for spewing out the truth and telling my side of the story. And you know what? Every day and on every occurrence, the story gets a little bigger. It gets a little bigger. And it's only been until just recently, since my brother died in 2017, and since I have taken my story out to social media platform as strongly as I have, and it reaching as many people as it has, it's only been up until then, and especially since God intervened, and the very same people that was attacking me out here started basically dying by the like a bunch of flies dying. They started dying by the groves. And if they wasn't dying for one reason, they was dying for another. Or if this wasn't happening in their life, something else was happening in their life. In other words, the people that was attacking the individual that's sitting in behind the camera right now talking to you, it turned on them. It backfired on them. And there is 1,000 zillion trillion different ways that something like this can backfire on a person. From them going through a divorce, from them finding out that one of their children is going through a divorce, to maybe a bad pregnancy, somebody was in a bad car accident, somebody got diagnosed with cancer, somebody that they know died. There's lots of different things that can happen pertaining to karma, especially bad karma, that can hopefully open up people's eyes. And since my brother died, there has basically been no traffic coming up and down the road. Now, it did take till 2018 before God put his hammer down and people started basically dropping like flies around here. It did take up until then before they quit coming out here agitating and aggravating and provoking and hunting and tormenting our lives. Of course, our lives was no longer our lives, but my life at that point, because they'd done already tormented my younger brother to the point of tormenting him to death. That, as far as I'm concerned, because of dereliction duties, the people in Weakley County courts will stand guilty of. One day in the great judgment, they will stand guilty towards having blood on their hands. But you know what? Since then, I found out other affairs that's happened with other people's lives. It ain't just been mine. Just like the young boy that died, and then they wasn't willing to offer even basically nothing, even though it was under their watch that he died. I just haven't never heard of so much and so many illegitimacies coming from so many different sorry people of so many different sorry affairs. And what you're listening to on TV is only basically one illustration of that, coming from upper levels of management or upper levels of government pertaining to what you're hearing here. Let's listen to some more, please.
Even though he didn't use their names, at guys like Jim Comey and Andy McCabe, who are gone now, but who really led the Bureau in the wrong direction.
Kim Strassel, great to see you. Have a good weekend, and everybody should read her column today, WallStreetJournal.com.
Thank you. 8 minutes past, got another alert just into Fox News. Breaking news on a case out of a subway in New York. One of Marine veteran Daniel Penny's attorneys says that their law firm...
We're going to go forward real quick. We've already heard this about the guy that killed the guy. You know, it took people, the risation of people, before that law enforcement agency ever even started acting upon this. And I guess if the people didn't rise up, that man's life would have been, his death would have been in vain, because nobody would have cared about what was going on.
Marijuana is typical.
Now let's go back here, right there.
Recreational or medical. The issue, though, that comes into play from Quest Diagnostics, which is one of the nation's largest drug testing companies, is that the post-accident tests for marijuana positivity hit a 25-year high in 2022. That means if a bad accident happens at work and drug tests are done, 7.3% tested positive for marijuana in 2022. And that is over a 200% increase in just 10 years. Business owners we've spoken to have...
You know what that tells me? That tells me that the system in play has not been set up properly to the point that the citizens is still abusing the rights to this particular product. To this particular product. And until they can modify the system, just like they modified prohibition with alcoholism, you're probably going to have just as many people that's going to be abusing the marijuana system as you do people that gets caught drinking and driving or get caught drunk in having a bad accident. It starts with the trust of the system to be able to control the loose ends from the people. And if you don't have neither, then you're going to have chaos. And that's what she's talking about here. Please listen.
You have say managing marijuana is difficult. It stays in the system for a long time, so you can't always tell when they smoke or ingest it. And some say they simply don't test because they wouldn't have.
So they need to modify their test better. Whether or not it's old THC or it's fresh THC. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist whenever it comes to doing that kind of stuff. But I'm sure if they can detect whether or not you got cancer in your blood, if they can detect whether or not you got this in your urine, if they can detect if you got that going on in your body, I'm pretty sure somebody should be able to figure out whether or not it's old THC or if it's new THC. I don't know how that they can do it, but if we can put somebody on the moon, don't you think we can figure out what's been going on with that individual towards their intake? I mean, I was always been told that you could take somebody that was a heavy smoker in marijuana and pull a piece of their hair out and have it dissected and be able to determine whether or not that was a marijuana user or not. It's outlandish. It's absolutely outlandish. And I tend to wonder if it's because we don't want to modify the system rather than just leaving the system broke.
Have any workers left, but some are smoking on the job, and that becomes a huge issue when machinery is involved. A garden shop owner tells us he's had to educate his workers against smoking during their lunch break.
We call it weed. I mean, we make it sound so like safe, right? I mean, you could pick it off the ground kind of thing. And that's the problem, is that it isn't safe when you're operating machinery. It isn't safe when you're using sharp instruments. If they're going to operate a forklift or operate a vehicle, this is completely a no-no. It's not acceptable, and it's dangerous for both them and others, including their other staff, the other staff.
So Dimitri also told us that he has to deal with workers actually bringing their marijuana to work because depending on their home situation, they might not trust that their partners or roommates won't touch their staff. So it is another thing that employers have to constantly think about and worry about. Bill, Dana?
Okay, all right, new world.
What was that word that she used? Trust? Couldn't trust their inmates? Couldn't trust the people that they was around? It's a Wild Wild West show. It's turned into a big hoopla. And until we're willing to confine it, reform it, change it, and the change has to start with the heart and the mind. It has to start with the soul. And if we're not willing to do that, then we basically got a Wild Wild West, Yahoo, broken system going on, to the point that now it's going to be basically as bad, if not worse, than what it was before they ever started promoting legalized medical marijuana to begin with. Now, if you'll look back right here, if you look back up. Hang on. Let's go a little faster. Right there.
of legalization, whether it's recreational or medical. The issue, though, that comes into play from Quest Diagnostics, which is one of the nation's largest.
Bingo, right there. States with legal, medical, and or recreational marijuana. Look at all the states that now participate in that. You see what I'm talking about? All out west, other than, I guess, what is this, Minnesota, is that what that is right there? Nebraska, maybe? I think that's Nebraska. This one hasn't, that one hadn't. This one and this one. I think this one right here, Missouri, I think it just passed. I don't think their charts is up to date. I may be wrong about that. But Tennessee, you see where Tennessee is? Tennessee's being surrounded. You got 3 states over here. You got 1 state right there, Illinois. Then you got 3 states right here. So eventually Tennessee's going to have to give in. All these old heads that think that they're going to be able to restrain the laws of humanity because they're the ones in charge, aren't willing to grow up and wake up pertaining to the needs and the wants of the people. Now maybe the officials, the law officials in Tennessee, maybe they have done the right thing by waiting to see what's going to go on with all these other states by using them as a guinea pig and seeing just exactly what's going on in all these other places pertaining to the problems. Because you're talking about insurance problems, you're talking about accidents, you're talking about major accidents. Colorado had a big problem at first whenever they first passed the marijuana laws pertaining to people with large amounts of money, that the banking industry would not accept the money going into their banks because the banks was considered being federally mandated, and marijuana on a federal scale is still considered outlawed. So what a lot of these people was having to do, rather than put all their money in a bank, they was having to go out and purchase vaults and put their money in these vaults. Well, whenever you do that, then you're talking about, once more, a trust issue, that if somebody finds out you got $100,000 in your vault somewhere, then you got to worry about somebody breaking into your house and breaking into your vault, or just stealing the vault, period. So once more, it's turned into a Wild Wild West game that should have been conformed after 40 plus years, whenever the founder of the Windmill Ministries, the guy speaking to you right now in behind the camera, made it known that marijuana had good qualities about it pertaining to medical purposes. They've had 40 years to conform it. They've had 40 years to get it right. And from what that I was just told, it's still a Wild Wild West game. Wild Wild West game. Especially affecting the money man pertaining to the insurance companies. Factory accidents. People having car accidents. People being outlandish pertaining to not being able to control their tempers pertaining to domestic problems, fights, divorces, all other kinds of problems. Once more, the marijuana industry has not conformed itself properly in being able to use this for medical purposes only. That word only means only. In other words, you treat marijuana just like you would treat Demerol, morphine, just like if you was to treat somebody with a bad cut and they needed to get a penicillin shot. You don't go around giving everybody penicillin shots. Everybody ain't got access to penicillin. You know why? Because it's a controlled substance. Just like any narcotic drug is a controlled substance. That's the way you do marijuana. And I've said that all along. But once more, why hasn't some of these states done what they have done when it comes to conforming over to legalizing, especially medical marijuana? And I truly believe the vast majority of it is based around that the state of Tennessee, as well as the state of Texas, as well as the state of Georgia, and some of these other states realizes that the black market, the syndicate, is so deeply bonded into their state that if they was to legalize it by changing it of being street value to now medical value, that it would actually disrupt their economy. And in some states, I'm sure it probably would, especially Texas. You know, Texas basically said the same thing about the illegal immigrants, and this was 20 plus years ago whenever they was talking about doing a big roundup. Well, we'll just go in and gather up all the people that don't have green cards that shouldn't be here and send them back over the border. Well, Texas reared up about that. What did Texas say about that? They said, you can't do that, because if you do that, you'll disrupt our economy. And based upon how many people was in Texas at the time that was working illegally, I'm sure that the statement that they had made was correct. That if the feds moved in on Texas 20 years ago, whenever the statement first was originated, towards coming in and doing a sweep up, I'm pretty sure that their statement that they'd made was correct. It would probably have an effect upon their economy. That would affect their inflation. And then they got to pointing the finger at Mexico. Well, it's Mexico's fault. It's Mexico's fault because of all the illegals coming over here and because of all the drug trade. The illegal drugs that's coming over the border. What did Mexico come back with? Mexico come back with a statement to America that if you didn't have such of an appetite for the drug problem, you wouldn't have the drug problem. Based upon supply and demand. Whenever you got a demand, then you're going to have people that's willing to break the law towards going over the border and bringing in the illegal drugs. So one problem contributes to another problem that contributes to another problem. So when are we as an American citizens going to wake up to this endless, relentless game that is costing the lives of so many innocent people, in addition to all the mismanagement funds, the dollars that the tax-paying people are being hoodooed or stolen out of? Because every time that dollar bill's supposed to go from one hand to another, Uncle Sam's supposed to get part of it. But whenever you have all this fluctuating illegal cash, unaccountable cash, and it don't necessarily have to be drug deals. It can be people in Mexico working for pennies on a dime that knows that they don't have a green card, but they're willing to work for half the price, basically beating the labor force out of people, other good people getting jobs, because now they're competing with people that's getting paid $5 an hour, while everybody else should be getting paid 10. All the farming communities in Florida, all the farming communities in Texas, all the farming communities out west, we get a third of our produce out west. The other third comes from Mexico. But whenever you have farmers that's willing to pay people $7 an hour cash versus paying them $14 above the board, now the taxpayers ain't seeing none of that money, and now the system is going broke. Well, that's pretty obvious. Something has caused our system pertaining to our national debt of being back in the 60s, early 70s, zero, that now they have had to extend the debt ceiling over 70 times since then, raising it to borrow from Paul to pay Peter, borrow from Paul to pay Peter. Well, you keep doing that year after year, event after event, then you run up a score such as $32 trillion that now they're fixing to have to make another decision towards raising the debt ceiling again. Kind of makes you wonder why they even got a debt ceiling if they're going to have to continue to keep raising the debt ceiling and go through this big hullabaloo every time we get to that level that we have to raise the debt ceiling again, knowing that the debt ceiling is going to have to be raised, knowing that the system is broken. The system is broken. It's not just the marijuana system. I've never seen things like they are right now. And in a way, it's discouraging. And that's contributing to the suicides towards people basically no longer having any type of motive in wanting to strive and push and try to make things better. And that's what Satan wants. He wants us to lose our momentum. That's just like any war. That if you can get the soldiers to basically lose their morale in believing that they can win the war, well, then you basically got half of it already beat. Because now you have beaten their morale. You have beaten their momentum towards saying that they can win, to the point that now they're saying, is this even worth the fight? Much less can we win. Well, if you continue to keep convincing yourself, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser, well, eventually that's what you're going to start believing. I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser. That's what the devil wants to do. He's out to kill, steal, and destroy. And it ain't just one item or one entity that he is after. He's after the whole shooting kabadge. That way he can shake his fist in the face of God and say, you see there? You see what I've done? I've caused the destruction of humanity. That's what he wants. Satan is defeated. He knows that he's defeated. But if he can convince other people that we're defeated, then we'll basically defeat ourselves. Because we'll no longer be striving towards that higher bar. Please, whoever gets this message, for God's sake, I beg of thee, pray for our great nation. Pray for these problems that we're now experiencing on a not just day-to-day level, but an hour-by-hour level. And if it's went on in my life the way that it's went on, beginning with Homeland Security on the top end, that dwindled all the way down to your local counties being this dishonest and this corrupt, there's not no telling how many more other lives out there that has been railroaded, that has been bamboozled, that has been done wrong by the system. Because the system originally was put in place with the self-checks to where people such as myself should be able to speak truth to power without being executed for. And you may say, well, Jubies, nobody's executed you. Well, to be quite honest with you, it would have been much simpler and easier if they did execute me rather than persecute me. But they was hoping that out of the persecutions pertaining to them provoking. Well, if we provoke him long enough, if we provoke him strong enough, eventually he'll crack. And when he cracks, that's whenever he'll shoot himself in the foot. Well, if they're doing this to me, don't you think how many other thousands of people out there that they're doing it to too? That if they can push you over the edge, even if you self-destruct, In the system's eyes, they have won. Because now they have eliminated you. You no longer in the picture. Or, if you take law into your own hands, by doing their jobs for them, now they come and gather you up and throw you in behind the bars, and basically you have shot yourself in the foot. In other words, you took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker, because of a broken system that was basically now attacking its people rather than working for its people. That is called a tyranny system. Now, there's no doubt we're not communism yet. Yet. We're not a socialist system yet. But in the direction that we are going, we are heading towards just exactly that. It's disguising itself. It's disguising itself towards being a communist-controlled system. But eventually, whenever enough of them little bites happen, just like me talking about that little bitty fox that went into the vineyard, that started chewing here, started chewing there, started damaging the limbs over here, started damaging the vines over there, that eventually, if you get enough damage, then the whole thing crumbles. As it's crumbling, that's whenever the big man upstairs says, now it's time for me to put my foot down. Now we'll go over to the Patriot Law, and now we'll declare martial law, and we will control these people by the end of a gun. We will control these people by military hardware. Well, when you do that, then you just as well be living in Russia, or you just as well be living in Honduras, or wherever, or Mexico, or China, because then you will not have any voice, and then you will no longer be a free, fair, open democracy, but you will be a tyranny. That's the direction that we're heading towards. And it doesn't matter if it's over the marijuana medical issues or the recreation marijuana issues. You got the blind leading the blind. You basically have it bleeding out up onto itself right now, based upon the 1%ers against the 99%ers. And boy, don't you think for a second that they can't make our lives a whole lot more miserable than what we can make theirs. Especially if they keep us divided, separated, and torn apart. And that's what they intend to do. They want to keep us as a one-man pony show. That's what's happened to the founder of the Windmill Ministries. That's the reason why that I become nothing more than a punching bag for all these other different law enforcement agencies out here, that whenever I would come into their area and I drop off material that a bunch of people didn't like, oh, they come after me. They come after me, boy. You wouldn't believe the things that's been said, and the things that's been typed up, and the recordings that's been lied upon to me about. Even out in where Sam Walton began Walmart's at, over in Arkansas. You won't believe some of the trash that got typed up about me by various law enforcement agencies out there, regardless whether it was federal, state, or local, because they put me in that category towards me being out in Oklahoma, which automatically put me in a category of me being a could-be, would-be homegrown terrorist. And that's exactly what started in my particular life. I can't vouch for everybody else's. Right up here in Martin, Tennessee, whenever I was passing out some Bible literature to somebody and told them that there was going to be an explosion of controversy in my life, in which it has been, that I was liable to wind up on the Channel 6 News, in which it has been. Wound up on the Channel 6 News in Oklahoma after they bowled up my truck. But it started in my particular life in my own home county. Martin, Tennessee.
And drug tests are done. 7.3.
In other words, we'll get this guy for falsifying files, which according to their law books means the same thing as somebody that was crying fire, fire, fire in a theater, or somebody that pulled down an alarm either in a school or in a cafeteria or maybe a library, knowing good and well that there wasn't a fire. Well, guess what? I didn't pull down no fire alarm in none of the above, and I didn't cry in a theater, fire, fire, fire. But yet no, they was dead set here in Weakley County that they wanted to get me on record towards me having the potential of terrorism implications, indicating that I was or could be a threat as a terrorist. Once more, the state of Tennessee, their governor, put out a ban. I don't know if the ban's been lifted. I don't know if the ban's still there. According to them, I'm not even allowed to go into a post office. I'm not even allowed to lick a stamp and walk into a post office and send a letter if I'm banned from all federal facilities in the state of Tennessee. That was in 2009. For surely to God, 10 years later, it's been lifted, but I don't know. I haven't never got no letter verifying that it's been lifted. And as far as I know, probably every time I get around a federal courthouse or any type of federal building or a federal park or a post office, anything dealing with federal, as far as I know, I could probably be nabbed up and jerked back in front of some sort of a crazy prosecutor by saying, well, he know that he was banned from all federal institutions. What was he doing in there? Once more, trying to take something small and turn it into something big. And you wonder how come you've been cursed? You wonder how come you're $32 trillion in debt? You wonder how come the flood of Mexicans and illegal immigrants of all sort has steadily flooded the United States? Quit wondering, for God's sake.
Sold it to us, but addiction treatment centers like detox and rehabs, those weren't open. There are no plans to open them, and currently in the Portland area,
we're turning into a third world country. We're turning into a banana republic. We're turning into something that our ancestors never intended for us to be. And the slippery slope that we're on right now, if we don't watch, we're going to eventually hit the bottom.
In these efforts to legalize that that you, I have to say we collectively in America aren't doing it the right way. Is there a better way to do this than maybe just reversing this?
certainly. So I would say not legalize, but decriminalize, which means that we can, instead of legalizing, we can attach penalties to things. So we can stop public drug use. That is not allowed in places like Portugal, where they've decriminalized drugs. They don't allow open air drug scenes. Portland is rampant with open air drug scenes. The doctor who came up with the Portugal model, his name is João Goulão. He, before decriminalizing drugs, made sure that rehabs and detoxes were open throughout Portugal. In Portland, we put the cart before the horse. We decriminalized drugs with absolutely no plan for detox and rehab. It was sold to us. I just looked at the voter's guide this morning and reread it, trying to figure out what the heck I was thinking about. And it talks about recovery centers. And recovery to me, and I think to most people, means detox and rehab. But instead, what the Drug Policy Organization is focused on, and that's who brought us this measure, is harm reduction, which really means needle handouts, not exchanges. They don't even do that anymore. Handouts, which is why there's needles everywhere, and foil and straws given to people by fly-by-night nonprofits. This is not the Portugal model.
Mm-hmm. Kristen Olson, we'll see what happens there. Portland, I grew up in the West. Getting to go to Portland was a big treat, and I know you love your community and want to do best for it. So thanks for coming on. We'll follow the story. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Portland's not the only one, Bill. Like other communities are thinking about this. We talked about one in Bellingham, Washington, which is reversing course, probably because their overdose deaths have gone way, way up.
That's a great point. I think the whole story about what she recites about the history of Portland is very telling. 2016, they really pushed the issue of homelessness, meaning you can sleep anywhere you want. Look where that's gone 7 years later. That big vote they had in 2020, look where that's gone now. And it passed. And she voted for it. I mean, what do we talk about here in our city all the time?
The predicted drug.
Are we headed there?
Well, and not just this one, but the predicted drug overdose deaths from December 2021 to December 2022, the average was up 0.5% across America, but 6.7% in Oregon. So let that be a warning, perhaps. And maybe there is a way to do it better, as she was.
She's a great guest, so I'll talk to her more. Meanwhile, we got some breaking news now out of Japan. Here we go now. The Associated Press is reporting moments ago that President Joe Biden has endorsed a plan which would train Ukrainian pilots to fly an F-16 fighter jet. Now, a decision on supplying jets has not been made. In the words of the Associated Press, that decision is still to come. But this would be a major move yet again in the Ukrainian war. That is breaking right now.
And it's another one of those things where the Biden administration says, no, that's never going to happen. And so the Ukrainians fight with all their might. Right. Turns out they actually maybe do need the planes in order to win. And so then you give them what they need too late, and this war is continuing on. And look, I'm not against necessarily this happening, but I do think that we have, as a country, decided to support them, but we are always like 3 steps behind with the Biden administration.
Yeah, 2 things coming up here. You got the spring offensive. We'll see how that goes. There's some reports the Ukrainians are hitting Russian targets deep into territory that the Russian army has taken. And the other thing that broke late last night, if you paid attention to it, apparently there was a calculator error at the Pentagon. Upwards of $3 billion that has been allocated for the Ukrainian war. Because
in which way?
Well, they put a price tag on new equipment when the equipment is actually all equipment. So the money's been allocated, which means they don't have to go back to Congress.
Right.
Perhaps now deep into 2024, if not beyond.
Well, maybe better that way than the other way, and that costing the American taxpayers a lot more. Right, if you're going to make an error.
Yeah, I get it.
In that way.
Right pocket, left pocket. Which one do you want?
Make sure you put the decimal point in the right place. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, excuse me.
Once more, you got a group of people of the blind leading the blind that don't know what they're doing, that's either overestimated or underestimated so many different issues. And by doing what he's doing in extending the war policy now towards training these pilots, you're basically setting things up just as a chess player would set things up, in elevating into a much deeper, broader, harder war that inevitably will lead into disaster. And these are all the things that, instead of going towards peace and utopia, is going in the opposite direction of peace and utopia. So we just keep making the same mistakes. We keep digging the hole a little bit deeper, and we keep going further away from the objective goals towards going closer towards them. How do you think that news is going to go over with Russia in regards towards those plans now of training these Ukrainians to fly these planes? It's going to add insult to injury in regarding the investment of the war, that now they're going to look at this as it being very, very intimidating, to the point of being provoking, that ultimately will only open up more of an opportunity towards them. Instead of them talking about nuclear armament, actually using nuclear armament for a retaliation, because of the way that the Western world continues to keep egging it on, egging it on, egging it on. And that's exactly how they're going to see this. And you know that that's exactly how they're going to see this. They're going to see this as the American people egging it on. Now, once again, I personally, from my perspective, I'm a religious man talking about biblical Bible prophecy. My ideology was within the first week or two in blasting Russians for doing what they was doing, because you was knowing good and well that they was breaking every violation Geneva Convention law pertaining to targeting citizens. That's whenever there shouldn't have been just talk about airplanes, but there actually should have been airplanes going after the Kremlin. Did they handle that way? No. Why didn't they handle it that way? Why didn't they nip it off at the bud? Well, there ain't no fun in that. Can't make money in peace. We talk about peace, but we're not actually pursuing peace. You wonder how come that I continue to say what I say about that the American people pertaining to the white man speaking with a forked tongue, that these people are full of, you know what, of those that talk about peace aren't really for peace. It's because none of them is willing to support the Windmill Ministries missions in actually obtaining peace, a true valued peace, a spiritual peace that only God can bring from the raggedness and the wretchedness of the hearts of mankind. And if we're not willing to do that, my friends, I promise you, we are going to continue to go backwards versus going forwards. Coming near a neighborhood near you. Fuel will go up, food will go up, insurance costs will go up, all the above will go up, until finally it reaches that climactic point whenever somebody says enough is enough, let's end this thing and let's push the big buttons. Is that what we want? Is that what we're striving towards? Is that our goals, is to self-destruct? Because we're doing a pretty good job at it. We're heading in the right direction towards doom and gloom in every aspect you can think of. I mean, my God, we can't even conform our marijuana laws in being able to test people accurately of knowing whether or not the THC in their bodies was put there a week or two ago, or a month ago, or a year ago, or if they just got through smoking a hooter today. We don't even have enough sense to conform our testing medical systems to be able to defy whether or not somebody had a joint in their mouth this week, last week,
Plus, Kansas,
or it was a year ago, or an hour ago. Now, you can't tell me that if we can put a man on the moon, that we can't do better than that. If we can break down DNA to tell whether or not somebody has committed a rape or a murder, if we can go into the blood system in being able to make these type of determinations, don't you think that we can create a machine that can determine whether or not the THC in somebody is old THC or whether or not it's just freshly THC? I don't know how that they can do it, but I'm pretty sure it can be done. How can you even determine that there is THC in somebody's blood system? You go from there and you modify the system. You tweak it. And you tweak it off of the strongness of that THC. Okay, you see the THC in the blood system, right? Is it strong THC? Is it weak THC? You know, if we've got methods to be able to determine pottery of whether or not it's 500 years old, 5,000 years old, or 50,000 years old, if we can tell a tree by the lines that's in the tree trunk of whether or not it's 25-year-old tree or 125-year-old tree, if we can make all these different determinations accurately, If we can go down into the bottom ocean and see the abyss, if we can go up into the cosmos and see what we see with Hubble, don't you think that we could conform the medical industry in determining whether or not that person has recently smoked a joint? Or whether or not it's old THC of somebody that was in there, let's say, 2 or 3 days ago? If we can determine whether or not your breath, just your breath, of if you read a certain point level that you're inoperable, you shouldn't be in behind a wheel or operating a heavy equipment. If we can do that with the breath, what else do you think that we can do with the blood? So what you just got to listening to in regards towards legalizing marijuana, in regards towards the mess that they've got going on with the insurance companies towards all the accidents, in which I said that all along, whenever they legalized marijuana, the way that they was doing it, especially recreation marijuana, that they was opening themselves up for a mess. Especially whenever it comes to liability issues coming from the insurance companies. In addition to it stifling the courts with all kinds of domestic problems, all kinds of divorces, all kinds of accidents. I could go on and on and on. Which leads me to my final say in saying, can't people realize that we, the people, have taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker in bringing destruction into our own lives? Can't we see that now? Towards the blind leading the blind, and now they're both off into the ditch. That once more begins with the soul, begins with the heart, begins with the body, begins with the mind. Can't we see that by now?
Kansas Republican Roger Marshall on the border just before Title 42 lifted.
It's very emotionally draining what we're seeing here.
This Rick Romore going on pertaining to talk. One group of people pointing their finger at another group of people is once more a group of people that don't know what they're doing. They haven't modified their actions. They're not working for the people. They're actually working against the people. And instead of them having a solution to the problems, they're actually part of the problem because they're not reforming the system. The system needs reforming. The people, the souls of man, needs reforming. Because it's only by and through God the Father and the Holy Spirit that's going to be able to lead us out of this darkness back into the light. But they want to continue to keep attacking the light. They want to continue to keep attacking the people that's trying to help them people. Such as myself. They want to make our lives miserable by telling us that we're out of our minds. We're out of touch with reality, was what the Oklahoma media authorities said. Whenever I discovered what I discovered pertaining to there being more to the Oklahoma bombing other than fertilizer. Give me a break.
But the nation needs to see this. This is why President Biden needs to come and look one of these camps in the eyes and see for himself the tragedy that's ongoing.
Truth to power. The Kansas senator saw the chaos firsthand. He is in focus. Senator Marshall, next.
That's going to end it for today. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from here. Good luck to each and every one of us as we ramble through these problems trying to dissect this one from that one and that one from this one, and the whole thing is based around the corruption of the heart, the corruption of the soul. And if we're not willing to look at that, all the rest of this stuff, hit and miss, tick for tack, is all a bunch of wasted time, wasted energy, and more importantly, wasted lives. When are we going to awaken from this stupor that we are in and focus on the real energy sources that has caused this, and try to conform not just our marijuana policies, not just our marijuana medical treatment centers that now is leading into the homeless problem, that they're trying to decriminalize heroin and all these other major drugs because of so many people living homeless and so many people that's basically diminishing their own lives by basically becoming dope addicts, dope fiends, and a great deal of them are basically committing suicide by overdoses. When are we going to address the problem versus only the consequences of the problem? The problem begins with the soul. The problem begins with the heart of man, humanity, mankind. And if we can't address that as sincere, loyal followers of Christ, then all we're going to have is the tail wagging the dog versus the dog wagging the tail. And even though, and I brought this out before, even though we're moving just like a dog chasing after its tail, going around and around in circles, we're not going nowhere. We're not getting nothing done. We're moving, but it's costing. It's costing, and it's costing, and it's an endless cost. And I tend to wonder that certain people that's in control of our political affairs as well as our professional affairs, regardless whether it be the medical industry, the law enforcement industry, or whatever, I tend to wonder that this is what they want. They want to turn it into a big game. They don't want to destroy their cash cow. Why in the world would they want to eliminate the grand finale pertaining to the Luciferian Lucifer, Satan himself? Why would they want to destroy their cash cow? Look at the money that the Homo sapiens has made off of their cash cow. Just like people using the Lord as an umbrella by trying to convince people that their behaviors or their actions are the actions for the benefit of the betterment of we the people, but in reality they're only toiling with us. And they're using Jesus once more as a cash cow. And I'm just not talking about the ministers. I'm not just talking about the clergymen in the churches. I'm just not talking about the priesthood or the nurses or those that's dealing with counsel in church affairs. I'm talking about those that go to church that are lawyers, those that go to church that are doctors, those that go to church that are judges, those that go to church that are prosecuting attorneys. They talk the big talk. Oh yeah, they talk the big talk. But in reality, why would they want peace that would be contrary to their very own professions that they're in? That would be like a doctor saying, well, I want to heal everybody. That way I can end my profession to where I can no longer have to practice medicine because nobody will be sick. In reality, they don't want to heal none of us. Not just figuratively, but literally. These medical facilities don't want to heal us. Because if they heal us, then they're going to be beating themselves out of a job. They only want to treat us. That way we'll keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back. Well, in the meantime, who's paying the ticket on this? Begins with the insurance companies. But then the insurance companies pass it down to who? The taxpayers. So it's we, the people, that's paying for this. And if we're not paying for it in one aspect, I promise you, we're paying for it in another. And once more, if we're not willing to beat the horse on the right end, as the old saying goes, you're only beating a dead horse. You will never arise the horse. You will never fix the problems. You will never have peace and utopia, as the Bible talks about in the opening of the second seal, because there's no way that you can take peace from something that does not have peace within it. And as of right now, we have went further from peace in the past 30 plus years pertaining to the divorces, pertaining to the drug overdoses, pertaining to all the above. We have gone in the very, very opposite of that in which what the Bible predicts is supposed to happen. Now you wonder how come in 2005 that I reversed, and instead of me promoting peace, I started promoting bloodshed of a bloody road ahead. And then about a year and a half to 2 years later, I promoted major electrical disturbances pertaining to the forces of nature. Now, on either account is once more in the opposite format of love, grace, peace, and utopia. This is what the people in the Western world wanted. No ifs, ands, buts about it. They can dress it up, they can color it up, they can mascot it up, they can put on all the rouge and all the smelly perfume that they want. But at the end of the day, a whore is a whore, and a whoremonger is a whoremonger. At the end of the day, a lawbreaker is a lawbreaker. And a corrupt person or a dishonest person is a dishonest person. And I know that the message that I'm putting out here is not a popular message. I know it's not. And it's got to do with accountability, and it's got to do with people opening up their eyes. And if we as a society, if we choose that we want to continue to keep making the same mistakes again and again and again, and continue to keep digging our holes deeper and deeper and deeper, just as the Bible talks about, the blind leading the blind, then keep things just exactly like they are, because this is the direction that you're heading towards Great Depression. Regardless whether it's Joe Biden approving Ukrainian aviation, airline industries towards training their officers to fly planes, or passing laws pertaining to marijuana laws and not having enough sense to tweak or modify the testing of these laws to where now you can stay on top of your game. The blind leads the blind both shall go into the ditch. So I know that whenever I talk what I talk, say what I say, emphasize what I emphasize upon, it's not a popular message. People will talk the talk, with that forked tongue. Oh no, he don't know what he's talking about. Dennis don't know what he's talking about pertaining to there being 2 bombs that killed 168 people the day of the Oklahoma bombing. Dennis don't know what he's talking about pertaining to the ATF that wrongfully entrapped them poor people that was preying on the minds of the weak. Dennis don't know what he's talking about on the 51-day standoff whenever they used 90 plus canisters of tear gas, and God only knows the tear gas that was coming out of that tank during the time that they steadily was poking holes in the building for 6 continuous hours before it finally turned into a towering inferno. Dennis don't know what he's talking about pertaining to the marijuana industry laws. Dennis don't know what he's talking about pertaining to interpreting the Bible correctly. Okay? Put me, compartmentalize me, continue to put me in the same category that prophets of God has been put into again and again and again. And I promise you, you will see the same results that has come from other prophets of God that has been dehumanized and demonized by the same group of people. Though we may be in a different century, we may be dealing with people today that wear different clothes, and instead of them walking or traveling by horse, now they're traveling with automobiles or other fancy items. Though we're living in a different era, we're still dealing with the same emotions. We're still dealing with the same desires. We're still dealing with the same corruption. It's the same pile of poo-poo. It's just put in a different hillside, covered up, disguised in a different way. But we're still dealing with the same inadequacies coming from humanity as we've always have. Rather than treating the problem, you're only treating the consequences of the problem. You're shooting at the target, but you're missing the bullseye. You're shooting around the bullseye. You're shooting at the target, but you're not hitting the bullseye. When are we going to quit this endless, senseless, harsh game that is costing so many thousands, not hundreds, if not millions of people's lives? Thank you for listening. God bless. Good luck to all of us, and may heaven, God bless you, Lord Jesus Christ. May heaven help us all in these trying moments and times that we're living in, just as the Bible discusses towards in the last and final days that we will be living in perilous times. I don't know that I have ever seen a time where it was any more dangerous, sir, from A to Z, than what it is today. And if you think it's bad in America, oh my God, don't even think about going to Guatemala or Colombia or some of those other countries that is basically falling apart at the seams right now. Even Africa, northern part of Africa, has went on a frenzy. Jerusalem right now, pertaining to the Gaza Strip, it's on a frenzy. Iran, pertaining to the things that they're involved in, pertaining to nuclear stuff, it's still going in the wrong direction. The deal with Russia, Ukraine, the deal with China and Japan. I mean, I could go on and on and on, engaging into the 7 continents, pertaining to the 200 countries, in the calamity after calamity after calamity that has befallen upon to the inhabitants here upon to the planet in these final and last days. Once more, if we're not careful, we will go into not just a tribulation period, but we will go into great tribulation period. And once we get into great tribulation period, that's whenever all hell will basically bust open. And that's whenever the sky will fall, and that's whenever the wrath of God will come down upon the humanity such as you have never ever begin to famine in your entire freaking lives. And if you think that the movie, the zombie movie or the mummy movie pertaining to some of those crazy movies that they put out there, you think that all that stuff is scientific and fictional, that's what you're going to see, my friends. You're going to see babies with swelled up bodies here in America, just like third world countries, with flies consuming them, and basically them starving a starvation because they're malnutrition, just like we're seeing right now pertaining to over in Portland and California in regards towards the homeless and the drug-induced people that basically are just barely hanging on. They're barely existing. And they're trying to once more, they're trying to hit the target pertaining to the bullseye, but they're shooting all around the target. You know, by them trying to decriminalize heroin and decriminalize this drug and decriminalize that drug. That is not the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem begins once more with the heart. And if we're not willing to look at that, then we're not looking at the solution. And instead of us going forward, in actuality, we're going backwards. Now you can disguise it, paint it up, perfume it up, put all the rouge and makeup on it that you want. But I'm telling you right now, America and the world is heading down the wrong path. And I don't know if it's going to take a year, 6 months, a year and a half, 2 years, 5 years. But just like Donald Trump talked about, the inevitable is going to happen pertaining to us defaulting on our indebtedness. It may not happen this time. And it probably should have already done happen the last time. Because all it's doing is creating a stumbling block that is pulling the rest of the mid-class and the working class down. I mean, the wealthy and the rich, those that's making $100,000+ a year, that's already got big, thick bank accounts, that's made good financial decisions, that's got, you know, a treasure chest to depend upon, unless the government does completely go belly up, they're going to be taken care of. They're going to be just fine. Will it strain on their system a little bit? Oh, yeah. Instead of pumping, you know, $40 worth of fuel into their 22-gallon Suburban, now it'll cost them $80 or $90 to fill their Suburban up. But you know what? Those type of people can stand that. They can eat it, and they can move on, and they can try to make up for their lost time in other areas, regardless whether it's swindling the American people out of this, or swindling the American people out of that, or working overtime, or getting involved in this project, or investing in this investment. They'll make up for lost time. But in the meantime, those that's already depleted, those that's already weakened, those that's already on some sort of a fixed income status, we won't go forward. We'll only go backwards. And those that used to have homes will probably become just like the people in Portland and in LA, becoming homeless, because you have a system that's set up to where the big sharks always eats the little fish, and the bigger fish eats the littler fish, and the littler fish even eats the minnows. It's an ecosystem. And whenever the ecosystem is so corrupt, and the trend is going in the direction that it's going in right now, to where instead of things getting better, they're getting worse every day. Every day. You can't tell me that that decision that Biden made of giving aviation, Ukrainian men and women approval of teaching them how to fly airplanes, you can't tell me that that is the wrong direction. towards peace and utopia. You can talk the talk all day long, but if you're not willing to walk the walk, that's exactly all it is. It's talk. If those raindrops never hit the ground, I don't care what Doppler says. It may be a big red spot on the radar that says the moisture is coming, the moisture is coming. But if the moisture never hits the ground, it's useless. It's useless. Thanks again, and shalom.